and welcome to episode 44 of Cocktail Hour. I'm Andy.
I'm Liz.
That's right, Liz is back. Woo! Go, Liz. It's your birthday. It's your birthday. And we have a very special author guest on. But first, before we go there, I believe our author guest suggested Moscato as the drink for this evening. I am having water, but Liz, I believe, is having Moscato.
No, I need to be shot because I just realized sitting down, I have my notes, I have my iPad with notes, I have my hotspot. I do not have my drink.
Oh, no.
Because, I just moved, as in a few hours ago, from one part of Jersey to another, and apparently that got lost in the wash.
Oh, that's too dang funny.
Uh-oh.
Kim, are you drinking Moscato?
I am indeed.
Oh, yay. So
yes, I am.
So as you can tell, Kim's already weighing in here. So let me just say to you folks listening out there, you must, this is not a suggestion, it's a requirement. Get your butts over to www.kimbaldwin.com because she's got everything you ever could imagine wanting to know about an author and books right there at her website. She's got vital statistics. She's got info on her novels, audio, video. I was just floored by how much cool information is over there. I had no idea Kim worked for 3 decades as an Emmy award-winning journalist in network news before she started writing fiction. I'm like, wow, it's pretty awesome. Dang.
I had a very long, very good career with CNN. I was one of their original founding people when they first went on the air. And I left there in 1997 and moved back to Michigan where I was born.
Wow.
But it was time. That's a very tough occupation, 24-hour news. When I left, I was working like 60 hours a week, so I was ready for a nice, laid-back change of lifestyle.
Wow. But the news isn't like it is what it was 30 years ago.
No, it certainly isn't. I mean, when I was there, we were sort of the only game in town for 24-hour news, and there's so much competition now that very different landscape for sure.
Yeah.
There's lots and lots of landfill.
Indeed.
I can say for myself that I am very happy that you went into penning fiction.
Yes, me too. Much more satisfying.
I can imagine. Is that a picture with you and Hillary Clinton on your site?
Yeah, in fact it is, yeah. I met Hillary when Bill was president, and I was on the editorial board of CNN, so we used to have these very cool, off-the-record sort of briefings with political people and celebrities and presidential candidates and so on. So I got a chance to meet her and have lunch with her one day.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. You've lived quite a life.
Well, I like where I'm at now, let's say that.
Yeah. And you go to Greece just about for a couple months every year, don't you?
Well, this was my first trip to Greece, actually, because Xenia has in the past sort of split her time between Amsterdam and Greece, and I usually visited her in the spring when she was in Amsterdam. So for the last few years when we've been writing together and I've gone over to visit her to write, it's been in Amsterdam. This was my first trip to Greece, so that was just an extraordinarily beautiful place.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, I've been there. I did backpacking around Europe when I was a teenager during my study abroad, and I went to several islands, and it's just the most spectacularly beautiful place. My favorite being Santorini.
Yeah, I would love to go there. That's definitely on my list of places to go in the future. I was in northern Greece for my stay this year.
And you'll be going back,
I was wondering, a lot of times when I read an author, I find certain patterns, some of them funnier than others.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I find myself saying over and over again whenever I'm reading or rereading something that you've written is that there's always a level of redemption involved. I kind of call it the redemption plot, and a lot of their stories, especially the lead operatives, deal with people who are either, I don't know if the proper term would be mercenaries, who are getting a little weary of a lot of aspects of their jobs, and a lot of the times the women that they fall in love with want to be better people.
I think that's a very accurate representation, especially of the elite ops. Those are really, I have to give credit where it's due, and those are really Xenia's stories. She comes up with the plots and the characters, and I basically just sort of show up to help her write them.
Oh, please.
And redemption is a very, very key theme in all the books. But yes, and a lot of my solos as well.
Yeah, I felt that especially one of my favorites is Hunters. And I like the, not only that I like the character, but I love the twists that, you never know who's really got the contract out on Kat, or which is her nickname, close to her actual name, but her code name, I guess, was Hunter.
Yeah, correct. That was a really, really fun book to write. I call it my divinely inspired novel because I really had no desire to write fiction when I left journalism. I never really thought about it, although a lot of my friends were writing books on the side. I just sort of, I made my living there writing 30-second and 60-second stories, and the thought of writing an 80,000 word manuscript was quite daunting. But I discovered lesbian fiction sort of by accident. I stumbled upon the Athenaeum site one day and read a lot of the fiction on there. I actually started with some rad stories because she was ranked #1 that week for one of her stories, and I just devoured that site. I didn't know that this sort of modern-day lesbian fiction even existed. And that led me to books that Rad and some others had written, and I decided to just sort of one winter day when I was cooped up in my cabin during a very long winter and nothing to do, I decided to just, maybe I'll start a story. And the whole plot of Hunter's Pursuit sort of came to me in a dream. I would write myself into a corner and I'd go to sleep kind of fretting about how I was going to get out of it. I'd wake up the next day with the scene, the next scene right in my head. It's never happened since. Never happened since. And all the twists and turns and everything that were in there. And I think it was sort of my subconscious telling me that this would be a really good avenue to pursue. And it gave me a really good story right off the bat. Everything since then, all my books since then have been more of a struggle to come up with plot twists and things like that. But that was an easy book to write, and never intended on getting it published, but I gave it to some writer friends of mine, and they really encouraged me to send it in, and it got a lot of good feedback and sort of started me on this road.
Yeah, I think it was
I have a lot of inroads on that particular novel. I've read it over and over and over again. And when we had Rad on, she had said sometimes writing the twists and the turns were like the hardest part of like her repertoire was writing those particular ones. So I find it interesting that it was divinely inspired.
Yeah, I would actually, I've thought about writing a sequel to Hunter's Pursuit. It doesn't lend itself to one because there aren't any other characters, and I haven't ever thought of a really good follow-up story, but I would love to do that. But I sort of set a pretty high bar with the twists and turns in that. I really have to come up with a really compelling second book to play off that. But I would definitely agree with Rad. It's much harder to come up with a book like that readers don't see what's coming.
Yeah. I think that was, excuse me, I think that was the very first book I ever read of yours. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And like Liz, I think I read it over and over myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really good stuff. And I don't think I mentioned this off air, but our listeners haven't heard it yet. I went to GCLS this year, and I was so happy that Dying to Live won a Goldie, and then I found out it also won a Lambda.
Yeah.
So that was just, I was so pleased for you, and that was just a little thrill. Yeah.
It was an absolute thrill. We were nominated last year for a Lammy for Missing Links and didn't get it. And I didn't go to the Lammys in part because, as I told you off air, I spent all my money going to Greece this year and couldn't go to either GCLS or the Lambdas. And I seem to have actually better luck when I don't go to award ceremonies at winning. I've only won awards where I've never showed up, and the years that I went to GCLS, I was always a finalist and never won. So and now I wonder whether, I kind of might jinx myself if I go.
Well, no, we'd like to see you in Dallas, just so you know.
Yeah, I know it's in Dallas next year, and I would love to do it. It's kind of dependent upon what my budget is. It's going to, again, happen right after my spring trip to Greece next year to write the last Elite Ops book. So we'll have to see what my finances are like, but I would like to go.
Oh, wait. Hold up. Did you say the last Elite book?
Yeah, it's a 7-book series. We are almost done with book 6, which is what I was there writing this spring with Xenia. The next book's called The Gemini Deception. It will come out probably in March of next year. And then we start work on book 7, the final book.
Oh, wow. I'm
not looking forward to that, believe me. It's been such great fun writing these books that we'll have to come up with more projects together.
Yeah. That is so true.
Yeah.
As readers, we won't stand for it. Otherwise, I'm just saying.
Well, and I love to have these business trips to Europe that I can write off as well.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Liz, you want to say something? I'm just hogging the combo.
I was going to say, one of my favorite of the series is Missing Links, and unfortunately I can't pull it out of my library because it's in a box somewhere. But what I liked about it is that I didn't expect the character from Lethal Affairs to show up again, and certainly didn't expect her to become, a protagonist. Yeah.
Well, I think that was one of the really brilliant things that Xenia has planned for this series is the character of Jack appears in all books but one, and started out as a very small character really in Lethal Affairs, but she's really a central figure of the whole series. And what she's got planned for the book we're writing and the next book, I think, is really going to make readers of the series very happy.
Yeah, I loved getting to know her better as a character because she was kind of a villain in Lethal Affairs. But then finding out how she had been treated by the Elite Operatives Organization and how that shaped her and her psyche and her future was just very poignant.
Yeah, I think that Xenia has done a really wonderful job in crafting a very complicated character and probably the epitome of the whole redemption theme.
Mm-hmm. Circling back to one of you have several books that are based in Bettles, Alaska.
Yeah.
And I really like the reprisal of different roles that people from characters from Whitewater, Rendezvous, and Breaking the Ice showing up in High Impact. But I was curious what made you go in a paranormal kind of direction with that book, High Impact.
Well, that's a good question. It was a bit of a risky element to put in there because I've not put anything of that sort in any of my previous books. And in fact, I have always really gone for absolutely realistic, believable plots. Believable characters, believable plots. This could really happen. And it started out with the character of Pasha being someone who just sort of had these very strong hunches about things. Mm-hmm. And, I wanted to make her a little different. I have had points in my life where I've had very strong hunches about things, and I can't ever put my finger on what they are, but it tells me that pay attention to this person that I've just met, or this is a job you really need to take, even if it means, moving across the country and throwing your life into upheaval and some things like that. And I've always followed those hunches, and they've always paid off. So I sort of wanted to imbue one of the characters with this sort of strong hunch. And I was probably 10 or 12 chapters into the book, and I was sending it to my beta readers. I have 3 beta readers. And one of them became really fascinated by this character and wanted to see more of that. How did she get to be sort of, have this sort of sixth sense hunch? How is it going to manifest itself? And that encouraged me to develop that character more. And I never intended it to be quite as I guess, a stretch of the imagination to a lot of people. I never intended it to really go that far, but it sort of wrote itself in that way. And the character sort of insisted on being a little bit more than I expected her to be. And then the very end of the book, which I don't want to really give it away, but the theme of love heals all, sort of, that part of it wrote itself when I got to it. And I did sort of debate with myself whether to keep it that extreme. And I just felt it was right for the story, and I hope that readers would sort of allow me the latitude to go there. It has gotten a few responses from readers that is their least favorite book for that reason, because they can't suspend that belief. But I think the majority of readers, I think, allowed me to write a sort of fairy tale, which is how I view it.
Yeah, it definitely surprised me, but if you're going to have anything out of the ordinary happen, it seems like Bettles, Alaska, and the eccentricity intrinsic with being in such remote locations seems to be the place to do it. I was also wondering, you said that you had a cabin, and that's where you did your writing. Is your cabin in a place as remote as this, or was it just kind of someplace you visited, spent a lot of time in Alaska?
Well, my cabin, I do have a cabin. It's very small, less than 1,000 square feet. It's in the middle of the Manistee National Forest in Michigan, which is a huge forest. I'm surrounded by federal land. I'm miles away from the nearest small village. I have very few neighbors, especially in the winter. So it is a very remote cabin. But I actually used my cabin as the basis for the cabin in the book Force of Nature. And,
really?
Yeah, if you read the description of Erin's cabin, that's basically a description of the interior of my house. And what was really freaky about that is I wrote that book. I set this as her cabin, and in the book, her cabin is destroyed by a tornado. And in fact, the book opens with the tornado. And I had submitted the book, it was edited, and it was at the printers when I had my own tornado at my place. And it came down right on my property line, came right through my property, right over my house, like 3 feet over my house, took down 200 trees all around my cabin, took out my propane tank, my power lines, a lot of stuff, but no huge damage. And then when it got to the end of my property, went back up into the air. It's the only tornado really in my county ever, and it was only on my property. So it made me a little bit freaked out about be careful what you write, because there's a lot of other stuff that I've written that has then come true.
Oh, wow.
So it was a very freaky experience. But Bettles is actually is a place that I've been to. I went there in the late 90s on a 10-day dog sled trip in the middle of winter. And we were based in Bettles. We got our dog teams and then went up very close to the gates of the Arctic National Park. And in fact, the place where our trip culminated, where we turned around and came back to Bettles, was this place right out in the middle of nowhere at the confluence of the Wild River and the Flat River. And we stayed in an old trapper's cabin, and that is where I have set Bryson's cabin. So I've actually been where Bryson lives. The cover of the book, Breaking the Ice, is a photograph I took at that spot. So that's sort of Bryson's view out of her front porch.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
I love how the fantastic and true to life seem to keep on running all over each other,
converging. Yeah. Wow.
They very much do. A lot of things in my books were either things that happened to me or places I've been, or things that have happened to friends of mine, and a lot of my characters are composites of people I know or celebrities or people I've read about, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I got a lot of ideas from my time in the news business.
So what is your writing process like? You mentioned that the only one that ever just came to you in a dream was Hunters, but, obviously you've pushed your pushed yourself to write these great adventures. And so obviously you have to have a winning process, and I would like to know what that is.
Well, the Elite Operatives books are written in 7 to 8 weeks. That's exactly how long it takes us. Xenia does a lot of preliminary work in sketching out the characters, and she has a pretty good plot to begin with. So we sit down, and usually March, April, May, sometime in there, we spend 2 months together, and we write just nonstop the whole time I'm there. We can have 6,000-7,000 word days, and we come away with a very clean first draft that then we tinker for a month and get done. My own writing process when I'm writing my solos is kind of a different story, because I can't begin to think about the next book until I've really thoroughly wrapped up the last ones. I can't have 2 cast of characters in my head at the same time. It's very annoying. So I wait till one book is done, and then I start thinking about the next one. And it's always a difficult process to come up with my solos. I try to include some sort of nature backdrop for the most part, because that's kind of what I like to write, what I'm known for writing. Not a lot of people put nature as a really big third character in their books. So I sort of feel like I fulfill a niche there. My own favorite type of reading, aside from lesbian fiction, is nonfiction adventure stories, mountain climbing and sea survival and polar exploration and that sort of stuff. So I get ideas there. I like to put my characters in some sort of danger. So I try to come up with a sort of a danger plot, some different kind of characters, and then it kind of goes from there. I set goals for myself of writing 1,000 words a day minimum, so that I can do a 85, 90,000 word book in 3 months. Because I have this background as a journalist working under deadline, I'm very good at meeting those quotas. If I miss a day because I'm doing something, then I make it up on the weekends. I write sort of whenever I can. I only work a part-time job, so that gives me a lot of time to write, and I'm able to meet that. And I was a copy editor for many years, news copy editor, so I sort of edit as I go, and I can write a very, very clean first draft that needs very little revision. So it takes me roughly a month to research a book, 3 months to write it, and a month to edit. Wow.
You got that down to a science.
Well, by now I sort of do. I think the more you do, the more you know what is going to fly with an editor. You know what readers are going to like, and what I get in terms of feedback from readers really plays a role often in deciding what I do. I intended only to write one book set in Alaska, and Whitewater Rendezvous was so popular, people kept asking me for more, so I went back there for Breaking the Ice, and that did really well, and got a lot of really good feedback, and so I decided to do a trio of books, and sort of came full circle with High Impact, because I did enjoy the challenge of revisiting some of the favorite characters from previous books and bringing them in as supporting players, and it was easy to do with the jobs that I gave them in earlier books. I mean, having Bryson as a bush pilot, I can use her in any book set in the state, basically.
Yeah, sure. And I really like the fact that it looks like every single one of your books, you on your site, you offer the readers Chapter 1.
Yeah, Chapter 1, sometimes the prologue in Chapter 1. But, I have spent a lot of time on my website over the years. I found a really good web design program that's very intuitive. It's all drag and drop, so it's pretty easy to build pages, and I think that readers are more apt to buy a book if they can sample a bit of it, and look at the reviews, look at the Chapter 1s. There's even a couple that when I recorded an audiobook of one of my books, of Breaking the Ice, and while I was there, kind of for the heck of it, I also recorded the prologues to Missing Links and Lethal Affairs, so you can read the Chapter 1s or you can hear me narrate them.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's so cool. One of the things I think our listeners are going to appreciate Kim, is that you are so responsive in how you decide to choose your next novel. I mean, I think that readers would get a kick out of learning that because they were so enamored of the Alaskan books that you decided to make another.
Well, I think that, obviously writers write for themselves. I mean, I enjoy writing. I enjoy creating characters and living in my own head in a world for a while. But it is the feedback that you get that really makes it all worthwhile, to know that something you've written has entertained somebody or kept them up late at night or, in some way touched them, even momentarily. And so I love to hear from people what they liked about a particular story, which of my stories is their favorite and why. I really eat that up.
Yeah, that's cool. Very, very cool. I was wondering, considering the role that Megan Maxwell had in a world news setting as her job in Whitewater Rendezvous, and I was wondering if that kind of overlaps with some of the roles that you've played at CNN.
Yes, very much. In fact, Whitewater was a little bit the story of my change in lifestyle from going from CNN to living in the woods in the two main characters, in Megan and Chaz. Megan was very much patterned after me. I was not. She is an executive vice president or vice president. I made her, and I was never that at CNN. Although shortly before I left, I was told I was being promoted to vice president. But then we had a big change in management, and all of the managers were offered early retirement. So I never actually got the title. But so that was sort of my character was based a lot on myself. I was a manager there in charge of the writing and copy editing staff, and the people that I had working on weekends and overnights and stuff, of course, didn't particularly like that. So I gave Megan the nickname Royal Ice Bitch, which actually was my nickname there for
sweet
for a short period among my disgruntled people who had to work overnights. Didn't particularly like that. And the group Broads in Broadcasting, which is in the book, actually did exist in Atlanta. We had a bunch of female journalists from all the local TV stations, the newspapers, from CNN. We all used to meet once a week at this tavern and talk about sort of the business and what jobs were available and gossip and all sorts of stuff. So that group actually did exist, although we never traveled together, and that made it into the book.
Liz, you got anything else?
Yeah, of course I do. I always have something else.
Well, I don't want to hog all the time. That's why I'm asking.
I know. Well, actually, a book that I did reread in anticipation of this interview, which was mighty hot, was Flight Risk, which deals with the Witness Protection Program. WITSEC. Do you know what does WITSEC stand for? Because it seems like a hybrid for an acronym.
It is. And I can't tell you what it is offhand. I read there's a very good book out called WITSEC about the Witness Protection Program, and I have that in my library as well as some other reference materials. But, of course, you're going to ask me that off the top of my head, and I'm not going to be able to tell you what it is.
I bet I could Google it real quick.
Well, I'm dyslexic, so every time I come across an acronym that doesn't make sense to me, I'm like, but that has the first part of one word, and what's the second part? I don't know. Probably some listener will make a comment for us. But what Flight Risk I liked a lot because another really hot, I guess, Greek character, Alexei Nikolaos, was pulled back into protecting witnesses in a very harrowing flight where a bomb, exploded where the witness she was supposed to protect was supposed to be sitting, but she wasn't because she had gone to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering, how did you come up with the plot for Flight Risk?
Well, Flight Risk, I think that the idea for it came from I watched some cheesy witness protection Lifetime movie, I think, in a desperate bid to find something to watch one afternoon. And And I thought that would be a really interesting job to have as a female protagonist. You know, I like to have one of my characters be this very strong, at least from outward appearances, able to basically handle anything type of strong individual. And so that seemed like a really good occupation to do that, to have one of the characters. And then, of course, you had to have who she's protecting. And if you have a romance develop between two characters, with that, you have built-in conflict, obviously. They shouldn't really do anything about it. So that's an inherently good way to keep the characters separated through the course of a book, and make for nice angst as they're getting closer and closer. And then if you put them on the run from a pursuing entity, so much the better, because they can't culminate their feelings for each other, and that also delays it. And I'm a great believer in delayed satisfaction in the romantic element, building the tension and all of that. So it seemed like a couple of really good jobs to put them in, and the story just kind of sprang from there.
Yeah, I also like the fiery Irish character. Blaine Keller was basically she worked in a travel agency, but she had a habit of having the 5-finger discount, as in, you know, nabbing things. And they had her coworker Claudia had gone out to get them lunch, but came back without anything to drink, and they just happened to have a soda warehouse behind them. So she decided she was going to go nick some sodas, and instead of just getting soda, she witnessed a mob hit. Yes. And then found herself embroiled into like the witness protection program, and also having like the mob boss wanted out for her because she's the one who actually saw him kill one of his sub-captains. And so that was like the entity, that the force that they'd be running away from. But what makes it a little more interesting is that Alexiou, the one who ends up, you know, protecting her at all costs, has some history as well with this particular person, including a romantic interest that she had that ended poorly.
Yes. Well, it was a challenging book to write in some regards, because I have a harder time, sort of as we talked about earlier, I have a harder time with the twists and turns type of plots. But that was another book that sort of, in reading about witness protection cases and, you know, how the marshals operate and all of that, that gave me a lot of the ideas for how to incorporate the bodyguard into the mix. And as you probably have guessed, it was kind of during this time, during this period when I was writing Flight Risk, one of my beta readers actually was Xenia. That's kind of how we got to know each other. Is she?
Oh, wow.
She and I started corresponding because she had read my first 2 books, and she gave me some feedback on them that was very insightful feedback about the themes and the characters, and we started corresponding and became friends. And I was looking for a beta reader at that time, and her insights were so good that I asked her to beta read Whitewater Rendezvous, which I was half through at the time, and she started reading Whitewater, came up with some great ideas. So I did borrow characteristics for Alexiou from Xenia. You know, I made her Greek, and I thought that would be kind of another interesting aspect to basically put a foreigner in the book, and that allowed for some exotic locales, which I'm also fond of writing. And she beta read that book as I was writing it, so that was very helpful. She gave me some great suggestions in that regard. She has some great, she is really the master at intrigue plots and being able to think, even when we were writing like Lethal Affairs and Thief of Always, she was incorporating little hints and threads in those books that readers wouldn't find out the payoff for that for another 3 or 4 books. Well, I can't do that. I have to do one book at a time, and I can't be looking ahead. But so she made some great suggestions in Flight Risk about a few of the plot elements in that.
Sweet. Did she help you with the language as well?
She certainly helped me with the whole Greek part. Yes.
Because the reason why I asked is because there seems to be, a level of authenticity, and, the exclamations that you would have, we would say, God damn it, shit, oh my God, or what am I going to do? And all these different things were actually coming out in colloquialisms in Greek, which I thought was really
Yeah, exactly. She was very helpful in that regard, lending an authenticity. And I do that with a lot of my books. When I wrote Force of Nature, one of the characters, Gable, was a volunteer firefighter, and I had a friend of mine who was a lieutenant on a fire force, and, she read all of that. I have had nurses who read the medical stuff, and private pilot who read all of the Bryson pilot stuff in Breaking the Ice. So I really try to get people who know what they're doing or know about a subject to proofread elements of stories that I'm not expert in myself.
Yeah, there's nothing better than that, because there'll be things that would, pop up as being off, and not just, the people who are betaing it, but of course your readers who do love that you create believable and possible characters, that they're going to have a higher level of quality control with you in terms of what they'll accept. This is not correct. This is not what I expect from Kim.
And definitely readers will jump in with this isn't right or that isn't right. And my favorite thing is to, an audience. I had someone in the audience in Palm Springs at the library reading, I think last year, who she was a pilot for a commercial airliner, and she had read Flight Risk, which has plane elements in it, and Breaking the Ice, and she was really appreciative of the fact that was all very accurately written, and that was very satisfying to me. I really love that. But I think, again, my background as a journalist really helps, because I do really copious amounts of research for every book. That's probably my biggest contribution to the Elite Ops series, is I do all the research. I mean, if a character goes to a hotel and the hotel is described, it's because I've been able to find it on the internet, and it has pictures, and I can do a 360 tour, and I know, I do extensive research on if they're flying in this particular plane, how fast can it get from point A to point B, and, with the timeline differences when you have a story that's taking place in several areas of the world at once, especially in the Elite Ops books. You go to Colorado, and there's some scenes there, and then you go to Vietnam in Lynx, or you go to France in Demons Are Forever, and you have to know what the time differences are between the different scenes. And, that's very tedious kind of research, but I think it really adds to the credibility of the story.
Absolutely.
It's like a script supervisor.
Exactly.
The role that, basically a script supervisor is the one who's going to keep an eye on continuity.
Yeah.
And especially when you have something as complex as what you've been speaking of. And one of the quirks of the character Megan Maxwell in Whitewater Rendezvous was her encyclopedic memory and ability to come up with things that, off the top of her head, no matter what news was breaking at the time. Do you find that the 30 years that you spent in journalism has given you a very elaborate memory of many situations?
Well, when I actually worked at CNN, I had a really fabulous memory. And I was the person, I could name every cabinet member and every major political figure, and on election nights, I could name probably all the senators who were running and things like that. I really did have a really, truly amazing memory. But then, of course, you hit sort of your older years.
It's a menopause story gone bad.
Yeah, when you have these sort of lapses sometimes, and when when your lifestyle changes. Back then, I sort of had to remember all of that. It was very necessary because, something would break on the wires. It would be like an urgent thing, like, somebody got shot at or something, some major figure. And it would be a while before the wires would come up with the background information to go along with that story. And that sort of information wasn't necessarily readily available on the internet. It was still sort of in its infancy in the early 80s when I was starting out there. So what you could come up with off the top of your head was very helpful. And so I really made an effort to be very well read and very up on everything that was going on in the world. And now, of course, I live in a cabin in the woods and I write fiction, so I don't have I don't have any reason to do that, and I lived a much more relaxed lifestyle. So I do research as needed sort of now and don't retain nearly as much as I used to, unfortunately.
Wow.
But I'm sure you would be useful if you're going around in, I don't know, in a plane crash that you're waiting to be rescued and coming up with random factoids to keep you warm at night.
Right.
Like as happened in High Impact. I'm sure you have a little bit of sniglets here and there that you can kind of hop out with.
Well, hopefully I could come up with a few stories anyway to keep people entertained. But yeah, because I'm sort of fascinated with survival situations and have read a lot of that material, I think I would probably do better than most if I was shipwrecked somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know.
Now,
Who do you shipwreck?
Well, I was just going to say that's a really good premise for another book.
Actually, I have toyed with a shipwreck story. I look at what sort of natural disasters I've already covered in books, and I've covered sort of a lot of different types of things, plane crashes and tornadoes and other disasters, and so I've looked at things that I haven't done yet: earthquakes, avalanches, shipwrecks. So eventually I probably will get to them all.
Well, no, you had an avalanche in your first of the Elite series, didn't you?
Did I have it? I don't think we had an avalanche in there. Unless I'm completely blanking out.
I'm completely inventing something, perhaps. Oh, my. It's been a while since I've read that one. Sorry.
Well, there is. Well, you realize, too, that it's, I've got 12 books out now. We're working on number 13, and some of those books were written years ago, and you write them I write them in 3 months, and then I live with them for another year while they're getting edited and printed and all of that. But then you move on to the next story, and you don't want to repeat yourself. So I do go back on occasion and reread some stuff I've done. How did I do the sex scene in that book? Because I don't want to be redundant too much there, and that sort of thing. So I do reread sometimes, but some of my own books I haven't read in years. So if I get asked sometimes really precise questions about them, it takes me a minute to try to come up with, wait a minute, what happened in that book?
That's awesome.
I don't know if that happens to anyone else. I'm sure it happens to, I would think it'd have to happen to the Rads and the Karen Callmakers and the writers who have written 25, 30 books.
Sure.
I mean, that's got to be tough when you have a body of work like that.
Yeah, you probably have to set up a spreadsheet.
Right.
Here's your characters' names. Here's where they take place.
I can't put her hand on her right breast at this time. I did it in the last novel.
Yeah. Well, I do keep actually a kind of a spreadsheet like that on the Elite Ops, because so many of them recur in other books that you have to know, like, how old were they, what are their colored hair, eyes, all of that stuff, so that when you bring them back in other books, you don't have to go searching for a lot of that information.
That's inspired. So, this is going to be silly, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When you finally get done with the book, the editing process, and you know it's going to press, do you do anything like of a celebratory nature? Do you light up like the one cigarette you have a year? Or, do you I don't know, do you go swim naked in the lake? I mean, is there something you do to celebrate when you're done with the book?
There really isn't very much. I mean, it is a very, very satisfying feeling, the most satisfying feeling to finally be done with a book and be ready to submit it. But I don't celebrate because I never know what the editor's going to say. I don't know whether Rad's going to like it. I mean, there's always that tension of you want to be as good, as well received as your last book. Mm-hmm. And my books have been, thank God, very well received by readers, at least for the most part. And so, I always feel the bar is set very high. And getting things like, winning Lammys and Golden Crown Awards are a little bit of pressure in that regard. That you have to come up with something really good. So I don't really celebrate until a book is out and I start getting feedback on it and sales do well. And, you know, the real celebratory times is when you win an award or you get a really nice review or something like that, because that's the validation that all those hard hours, you know, by yourself are really worth it. So, yeah, I do have, you know, I did break out a bottle of champagne when we got the news about the Lammys, and I got another bottle of champagne out when we got the Golden Crown Award. And, you know, usually I treat myself to a very nice dinner out somewhere with a friend, and I always take a week or two off of doing absolutely nothing when I finish a book, because especially those last few weeks of trying to wrap things up, I'm at it very, very intensely, and a lot of other stuff kind of goes by the wayside.
That makes sense.
So I have a question for you, because I'm always curious about this. Who are some of your writing sheroes? Like, who are some of the people that you look up to, people who have made an impact on you, not necessarily as a writer, but maybe as a woman or a lesbian woman, because you like to read lesbian fiction? Like, who are some of the people who you admire?
Oh, that's a huge list, really. You know, I have to put Rad at the very top of the list because for a lot of reasons. Number one is she was the first real modern-day lesbian fiction that I stumbled on and was motivation to start writing. And I loved her stuff so much. And then how I ended up getting published by Bold Strokes was actually a little bit of a fluke. Hunter's Pursuit was first published by a very small lesbian press that went out of business, and it was only a very, very limited run was printed. But apparently Rad was one of the few people who bought that, and I got an email from her out of the blue that said, I really enjoyed Hunter's Pursuit. And I was flabbergasted. You know, it was like, you know, a huge celebrity writing to me. I was just floored by that, and so honored and so thrilled. And a brand new website, the Bold Strokes website, had just gone up. She had just founded the company, and there was very little on the website other than the fact that there was this new company starting. They were publishing Radcliffe, and they would do reprints. So I emailed Rad back, and I said, thanks very much for writing to me. I love your work. I'm thrilled that you read my book. And I see that you have a new publisher. Do you think that they would be interested in reprinting my book? Now, at the time, there was nothing on the website to indicate that Rad was the publisher of Bold Strokes books. It was that new. And at that point, she was the only author. So she, very tongue-in-cheek, wrote me back, I think they would be interested. And why don't you send them the book? Or send a query letter. So I did, and I followed the instructions on the website and sent it to Len Barreau, the publisher of Bold Strokes. And I did an email back, I'm very interested in talking to you. May I call you? Yes. So, you know, she calls me, and I, not knowing it's Radcliffe on the phone, you realize, I'm talking about the book. And, of course, halfway through the conversation, I'm praising the fact that I'm thrilled that you're interested in my book because I know you published Radcliffe, and I just love Radcliffe. You know, she starts laughing at the other end. Well, I think it's time to tell you that this is Radcliffe, you know. And it was hysterically funny. She signed me. I was the first Bold Stroke author signed. And wow. She has really sort of made all of my dreams come true. She is the ideal publisher. She is, you know, she's so supportive, and she has a tremendous vision for growing the company and giving us opportunities. And the marketing and the publicity that she does is just outstanding. And you know, so she's an inspiration to me on several levels in many ways, and really in the top in that regard. But you know, I get inspiration from a lot of different writers. When I read any well-written manuscript, it inspires me to always do better. And you know, Ann Bannon is a very early influence. I read a lot of Rita Mae Brown stuff when I was, you know, in my formative years that made an impact. And a lot of my BSB sisters that I've gotten to know at events and so on, Jennifer Fulton, Lisa Girolami, Clifford Henderson, I mean, there's just such a wealth of talent within BSB that, a lot of them have inspired me.
I love the story about Radcliffe. I think it's such a funny story, and that you were the first author signed aside from her. I think that's cool that we happened upon that little piece of trivia, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I think she had a really good laugh during that period, and of course, I have told that story a couple of times at conferences, and I was her first. Which she has inscribed in a couple of books, which I also think is hysterically funny. But I owe her a great deal, and I'm constantly inspired by each of her works that she puts out. So I think she sets a very high bar for the rest of us in terms of quality of writing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I'm a huge fan of the BSB product.
Yes, you are. We like that about you too. So, how about we play our favorite game over here at Cocktail Hour?
Okay.
Who would you fuck?
Yep, who would you fuck? That's one of our favorite games.
The lofty questions we ask, like all the important stuff comes to this.
That's right. It all leads to this.
Well, this is
They're formulated for us, Kim, so why don't you start us off?
Yes, since I have listened to previous Cocktail Hours, I knew this was coming, so I did give it a little thought. But it really was not difficult, because I must admit I sort of have a favorite character of mine, and that's Bryson Faulkner.
Ah.
I just think I like Bryson is a very strong woman. I would love to be a private pilot. I think that is such an awesome job. It was something I always dreamed about, but never got around to doing, sort of thing. But, she has a heart of gold. She is pretty fearless. She's pretty selfless. I imbued her with a lot of characters that I admire. So I would, without hesitation, probably go for Bryson.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Good choice.
Really one of the reasons I had to write High Impact. I was just not sort of ready to say goodbye to her.
Liz?
So what about you, Andy?
Oh, I'm going next? Okay.
Yeah.
Not that I can say her name, damn it. It's Kat from Hunter's Pursuit, sorry.
Katerina Dimitrios, yes.
Say it again, please.
Katerina Dimitrios.
Oh, I like when you do that. Whoa!
Hey now.
Yeah, that character's just hot. Hot.
Well, I think Hunter's a pretty hot character myself, so I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she's isolated. She can kill you with a fingernail. I mean, that's just,
or a can of soup.
Yeah, can of soup. I mean, she's just toothpick. Yeah, she's just hot. Mm-hmm. Whew. All right, Liz, you're up.
I'm stuck because I can't narrow it down. That's why I kicked you both into the fire first, because I'm looking at my notes at all the different characters. I'm like, I can't choose.
Oh, okay then. Well,
I like Hunter. Let me just put it this way. I think I just tend to like the Studley protagonist, no matter what story it comes up in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think Alexiou is damn hot, but then again, so is her sister.
Yep.
So it's hard to narrow it down. Actually, for fun, I think I'd probably like to be with Basso, even though that's a support character.
Oh, really?
Light Risk. Okay. Yeah, I liked how happy she was.
I have gotten several emails that I need to give Basso her own book.
Uh-oh.
And I've gotten a lot of books that I need to give Geneva her own book.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two characters that, in the back of my mind, may have stories one day. We'll see.
That'd be great.
Because I want to know what Basso does with herself. She kind of waltzes in at the perfect time. Is able to get the two of them out of their own heads and out of their own asses in some ways. They stick each other. You got to quit this shit and get together. Yeah, maybe she will answer you when she's here while she looks at her sister. You coward.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I like that a lot.
Oh, good. I'll keep that in mind as I'm coming up with. Because we're nearing the end of Gemini Deception, I am thinking long and hard about what my next solo will be. I don't have anything sort of locked in stone at this point. I have half a dozen ideas I'm playing with, but I'm hoping to start my next solo, well, probably by the end of the summer, and trying to get it out maybe next year even. So we'll see.
Nice. Well, we'll be looking for it.
Well, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I really, really can't express to you enough how happy and excited we were to have you on the show.
Well, it has been my great pleasure, and I thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a great fun.
Yeah, maybe someday we can maybe get you to come on again and maybe even do a reading. I'd
love that. Anytime.
Oh, awesome. Liz, did you have anything?
Well, ultimately, I'm thrilled because I am a huge fan, and I often go back to the days where I ran out of money to buy books, and you were my most enjoyable reread, like Hunter Pursuit over and over and over again.
Yeah, you can't go wrong.
Whitewater, Underground, Breaking the Ice.
Yeah.
And of course the Elite Operative series as well. So it's really fun to have an opportunity to meet you.
Well, I appreciate very much both of you bringing me on and spreading the word, and your support and encouragement are tremendously appreciated. Tremendously appreciated.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
So I guess it's good night now.
Good night, y'all.
Good night until next time.
Until next time.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Good night.